Please welcome the incredible Britt Frank.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Okay, I'm still laughing. So we were laughing about how Britt had a skerfuffle in the schedule and that we're on time. And I went to press record and I hung up instead of pressing record. That won't help the conversation.
Oh, good.
It's all good. So we're here now. And you have some really great stuff that you talk about. But first of all, tell us what you do and tell us what a neuropsychotherapist does.
So, hi, I am Britt. I am a licensed neuropsychotherapist and recovering hot mess of a human. So, a neuropsychotherapist is a person who practices psychotherapy, but is also trained in the nervous system and the brain. And shocking fact, this was a shock to me when I learned this. Not all therapists are required to learn about the brain, which is a little ridiculous if you think about it. So always important. PSA, ask your therapist if they have training in the brain. If they don't, it's not a deal breaker, but you do need to know that.
What you're being therapeutic about is the brain?
Yeah, well, you would think, but neuropsychotherapy is a specialization and not a requirement of all licensed therapists.
Okay, so how is it different than other therapies?
So, and this is such a great segue, because for anyone listening who has ever tried to think your way into doing the things that you know you're supposed to be doing, or try to talk yourself out of the inner critic voice, you'll know that doesn't always work. If it did, I wouldn't have a job and we wouldn't have podcasts like this, because very smart, incredibly capable people often know exactly what to do, right? Like, don't drink the bottle of wine, drink the water. Don't lay on the couch all day, take the walk. Nevertheless, here we are stuck in this gap of, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not doing it. What's wrong with me? And often that answer is because your brain is braining. And if you don't know that, it's like having an awesome car that you don't know how to drive. It's like you need driver's ed in order to drive safely. You don't need to know everything, but you need to know just a few things. So my work fills in that gap for people. So the brain.
So the brain braining, is that a trauma response?
No. And that's what's so interesting now, because trauma somehow has become this trendy, zeitgeisty.
Totally trendy.
It's so hot right now. Trauma is so hot. And I am a trauma specialist. And no, the brain braining is not always a trauma response. Sometimes it is. But often the things that we do that we think make us broken or stuck or less than are not because of trauma, and they're not because of something wrong with you. It's because if you don't know that your brain is not wired for optimized living, your brain is wired to prevent death, then you're going to think something's wrong with you. Even if you have no trauma and perfect parents, sidebar, no one has that. But even if you do, you're still going to have a brain that would prefer patterns and predictability, even if it's uncomfortable or bad for you, to doing new things. New things are very threatening to the brain's original design. Now, we can work with it, but it takes the shame thing off. Everyone has an inner critic. Everyone gets stuck. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
The guilt I have is like, there are days when I literally just want to lay in bed and watch TV and eat pizza. And there's nothing wrong with that if the other side of that is that I'm eating healthy, working out, and actually contributing to society. So, but the guilt and the shame creeps in. I'll sit there for 10 minutes and then I feel the urge to have to go and do something to feel accomplished.
Which then, and you're talking about burnout, which is what happens with burnout, right? Is, okay, I'm going to lay here all day and binge watch my show. But if I'm beating myself up over doing it, I have no longer banked the benefits of resting. Like, that is not resting. Watching TV all day and letting yourself have your choice to do this and then get refreshed, fill your tank, get back in the paint, fine. But if you're beating yourself up, not only are you not banking the benefit of it, you're now in the red, because now you have guilt and shame plus the original fatigue that you needed to tend to in the first place.
Wow. So do you think it's more detrimental than to take this pause, this time out in your day, but also just feel guilty about it?
Anywhere we're not feeling like we're making a choice, that's when that shame guilt spiral, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. But if we can anchor ourselves in, I have 25 plates in the air between my family, kids, my business, whatever. I am consciously choosing to take the next hour to hide in my office or under my bed or wherever you have to hide for an hour to whatever. I'm going to choose that. That's going to feel a lot more empowering than feeling like you're a puppet just on the puppet strings, alternating between productivity and collapse. We want to be in choice, which then makes things like resting actually beneficial and restful. But yeah, if it comes down to keep grinding or try to rest and beat yourself up, both of those are detrimental to all of your goals.
So do you think then the person who does feel that guilt and shame and always having to perform, is there that transition period where they can feel less and less guilty and actually relaxing?
Oh, that question. Well, you asked about trauma responses, right? So for someone who has a history of being raised in a household where perfection was the standard and you had to perform at this level in order to be deemed worthy or valuable, that person is going to have a hard time hitting pause and pumping the brakes versus someone that learns. And if sidebar, if you know anyone like this, send them my way because I don't know anyone who learned, guess what? You're not just a productivity machine. You have a great brain. You're capable of great things. You should go fight, win. And you're human. You have a biological brain that needs rest. So that's okay too. I don't know that person who grew up that way.
Oh, so you're telling me rest is okay?
I'm saying rest is a biological imperative unless you're a machine, but we need food, sleep, and rest is not just about sleep. Rest is about being able to shift out of that role of I'm the boss babe. I'm doing all of the things. I'm being everything to all of the people. That's not sustainable. And for people who can do that, that comes at a very high personal cost. And I know that from a decade of being a therapist and listening to those stories.
So you have a book. What's it called?
The Science of Stuck.
Right. And what was the thing that really motivated you to write this book?
Well, I could have called it The Science of Trauma, but that wouldn't, I'm still a businesswoman. That book doesn't sell.
No.
It's also not universal. Not everyone identifies as having trauma. I do, but not everyone does. Everyone knows what it's like to get stuck, whether it's finances, family, fitness, friends, sort of a lot of these F words. We all know what it's like to get stuck. Even the most high functioning people get stuck somewhere at some point. And I wanted to write the book that I needed way earlier on when I was spinning in guilt and shame. I had drug addictions, eating disorders, and I still showed up for work every day. I'd be smoking crystal meth on a Tuesday and showing up for a budget meeting on a Wednesday. So I wrote the book I wish I had because if I had known a few things, it might not have taken me so long and I might not have made such a mess in service of relief and understanding myself.
Where do you see most people get stuck? So remember that the audience are female entrepreneurs, so maybe in relation to the audience, but where's the common stuckness?
For this crew, if we were all in a room together, sitting on the couch doing nothing is probably not the dilemma facing most people in the room that we're now in with everyone listening. It's the reverse. Where do people get stuck? As a female entrepreneur, my hunch is you get stuck with your foot slamming down on the gas pedal going 90 miles an hour while you're feeling like you're locked in the trunk. You know, it's how do we pump the brakes safely? How do we slow down and create a sustainable rhythm, not balance? I'm not into balance. How do we create a sustainable rhythm so that we can feel like we're making choices rather than being, again, pulled on the strings?
And what are some tips or methods or frameworks that you help women like us pump the brakes?
Are you still there? Okay, you froze.
Yeah, there was a little pause.
So one of my favorite ways to help really let's go, let's do type women that is a huge source of the stuckness is trying to analyze the why am I stuck rather than just validating it and figuring out what our options are. So in other words, someone's having trouble with burnout and knows I need to stop. I need to rest. I need to take care of myself, but I can't stop. I won't stop. I'm going and going and going until I'm burnt out. Why am I doing this to myself? That's not a helpful starting place. Now, I'm a therapist telling you the why is a very useful and interesting question, but it's not a good starting question. Like if the building was on fire, we're not going to sit here and analyze why it caught on fire. We're going to look for the exit. and get out.
Yeah.
And so when you are stuck with whatever it is, and this is almost a universal intervention, don't start with why. Start with, okay, I'm stuck. I don't understand why right now. Just assume it makes sense. Like if I were to look at your timeline and your case file, there's no way we're going to go, I wonder how we got here if we were going to really analyze. Just assume it makes sense and then go straight to what are 3 choices available to me. Of those, what am I willing to say yes to? What am I willing to say yes to? Anchors our brain in a place that's forward moving. You're not going to get stuck in rumination. You don't have to go diving through the past. We need to know you may not like all of your choices. All of your choices right now might legitimately come with a very hefty price tag. But if you have to make one, you have to make one. And every choice that we make tees up a new set of options. So what are my choices? What will I say yes to? Much better than why am I stuck? And if all of your choices feel too big, we got to make them smaller. I call them micro yeses.
I like that. So what am I willing to say yes to? Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes the answer comes and then we have pushback. Uh-huh. What do you do from there?
If you get the pushback, then you have to make the choice smaller. Because again, how does the brain? Our brains do not, it's like food. Our brains do not like big, giant chunks of new, even if it's a good, healthy new. Doesn't matter. Even if this change is going to bring you all of the money and all of the health and all of the everything, your brain is still running on a very old operating software and it doesn't care. It's like, you're going to die if you take too big of a step. So we have to make it smaller. And often what I hear really highly successful, highly driven women say is, well, this shouldn't be hard. Like this should be something. This is a small step. And if you're not able to do it, it's because your brain doesn't think it's small enough. So we want to make them so stupid small. I call them micro yeses because smaller than a small step, smaller than a baby step. Make it so tiny that it's easier to just do it than not do it. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're, working 20 hours a day and raising a family and doing all of the things and you really want to get fit. Okay. Taking a walk around the block is not a viable option. You may think a 5-minute walk should be small, but if you're not doing it, that's because your brain doesn't like the size of that step. So a micro yes might be, don't try to take a walk, put your sneaker by the door, just one of them. And then your next micro yes is put the other sneaker by the door. And then the next day, just put one foot in your shoe, take your foot out and go back to what you were doing. And everyone pushes back and says, well, how am I supposed to get anywhere if I'm taking steps this small? This is stupid. Yep, it's really stupid. And that's why it works, because it trains your brain to tolerate the change process. You don't stay at that pace forever, but we need to solve for the starting gate. Once you get from stuck to go, then you can keep going. A micro yes for burnout is not take the day off. It might literally be set your timer for 2 minutes and put your phone down and just stand still. And I have clients where I do this in the office and we do it for 1 minute and it's brutal and it's awful and cringy.
It actually kind of sounds brutal.
Yes, it's horrifying, but that's a micro yes for burnout.
So interesting. I remember when I was business coaching, I had one client who was refusing to go and do the 20 or 30-minute runs that she knows actually makes her feel better. And I didn't realize I was doing this framework. When I told her, I said, hey, go take your shoes off or your socks off and go stand your feet in the grass. So she did that and she'd come back to the call. She's like, okay, that was cool. And I go, now go outside and hug a tree.
Yes.
Like, that's the weirdest thing.
Yes.
And I go, yeah, but when you're grounded in nature, it allows you to make clear decisions. And the next day she was literally running again.
Yeah.
That's
brilliant. And doing those small micro steps also gives you a little hit of dopamine. So when you make a promise and you keep a promise to yourself, that gives you that sense of agency and that sense of, I can, look, I just did. And the nice part about how brains brain, it doesn't matter that it's a silly little, just stand outside, just hug a tree. It doesn't matter. You set a thing, you did the thing. Now you get a little micro hit of dopamine, which is then going to quickly compound. And then you're going to be able to go further, faster, sustainably.
It reminds me of, so we're right now, my husband's launching this fitness program of which I took like a little bite off of it to test it out. And this trainer that we're working with is literally Mr. Olympia. So he's like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of our time. And very intimidating, huge guy, but actually quite a lovely coach. And he 100% of the people that come through this program do a 2-week cut. So what he does is he tries to figure out what is the threshold in which your body needs to drop to in order to start gaining muscle and weight again. I was the only person he didn't have cut because I was already slim. So in my diet, I had 200 or 300 calories of anything I could consume, anything I wanted. And quite frankly, my argument is that this should almost be the case for everybody because it allows it to be more sustainable. I would have half of a chocolate bar every single day and I still made the gains. And that was just a little baby step, was cutting out the other half of the chocolate bar. But I still got to have the thing that I wanted and super sustainable. And so it's coming back to this question of what am I willing to say yes to? I'm willing to say yes to the fact that I'm going to do this work, but eat the chocolate.
Yeah.
Now, we're also in this entrepreneurial no culture where they say to be successful is you have to say no to more things. So you're telling people, what are they willing to say yes to?
Which is the same thing if you look at it from a different frame. And there's a brain, and I don't disagree with the philosophy, like saying no is important and setting boundaries and knowing your capacity and all, like, yes. But when you say no, it does trigger a different pathway in your brain than when you say yes. A therapy exercise that I've seen done, and I've done it myself, have someone say the word no and like hear themselves say no, no. And then when you say yes, yes just feels more expansive. Yes is a word of possibility and choices. No is a very constrictive, limiting thing. So, and this was true when I quit doing drugs, and it's true for people with New Year's resolutions. Don't focus on what you're depriving yourself of. Don't focus on the no. Every no has a reverse. If you're saying no to one thing, you're saying yes to another. So rather than limit your no's, it's be really mindful of your yeses. Are your yeses choice-based or are they obligation-based? And if they're obligation-based, we want to switch those into choice-based. That's the same thing as saying no, but it's important to know saying yes does different things in your body than the word no.
100%. So what you're saying is, you have to understand this, is that by saying yes, you're actually default by saying no to other things.
Exactly. And the yeses, your brain is just going to reward you faster by saying yes to things. And with goal setting, this is true. Rather than focusing on subtractive goals, I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to stop whatever, you're going to likely have more of a better chance of success if you focus on additive goals. I'm going to put this into my life, because then the thing that you need to say no to becomes less important, less urgent, less loud.
Replacing it with something else.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm on this sober journey now, almost 5 months sober. And I didn't know that there should probably be a better framework of doing this, but I just quit cold turkey. And I wasn't like an alcoholic to say, but maybe in some people's eyes I was. I'd like to have 1 or 2 glasses of wine almost every day. Never got drunk because I can't have that feeling of not being in control. But I quit cold turkey and I didn't really replace it with anything. Although I do love these root beer Zevias. And let me tell you, I think I drink about like 5 of them a day now. So maybe that's my replacement. How does this translate though to business? Like, where in business do you see a lot of people not doing this work when they should be doing it? So we always talk about like saying no is, I think even Steve Jobs said that the success of Apple was they were more proud of things they said no to than things they said yes to. Where do we need to be doing this in business?
Yeah. And again, the philosophy is great. It's important to say no to. I've had people offer me opportunities that on paper sound great. They're not aligned with how I do my business or how I want to run my life, even though if we're just going dollar for dollar, there are things I should say yes to because look how shiny they are. But rather than going, I'm saying no to this, I'm saying yes to my value system. I'm saying yes to what is in alignment for me. I'm saying yes to the people, places, things, and opportunities that are going to put me in a place where once I get where I want to go, I can enjoy it. Because what's the point barreling towards the finish line and then being miserable once you get there? And there's plenty of people who are at the top of their game. And I know this because I see some of them and they're not happy. So rather than getting to the top of the mountain and realizing, oops, missed a few things, staying in alignment by saying yes to what's true for me, about me, what's true for this business. And it's important to know what those things are. A lot of people launch into business without stopping, not just what are we about professionally, but what are our values personally? Even if you're a business of one, what's your mission? What's your vision? Because then how are you going to know what to say yes to or what to say no to and what aligns and what doesn't?
So because we're saying yes to certain things, which means we're saying no to other things. When these opportunities come up that we're not aligned with, how then do we say no?
Lost you there. Okay, you're back.
Okay, did you hear my question?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So because in business, we're taught to say no to a lot of things. And you're saying what we're saying yes to means we're saying no to things. But we do have to say no in business. How do we say it?
Well, it'll start because usually, and especially for women, saying no comes with a heaping ton of guilt and shame and feeling bad for letting people down. And I don't want to have to say no to this person. So before you get into this, having the no conversation with the actual person, the self-talk, the self-care, the kind of personal work there is we have to calm down the guilt by reminding yourself, I'm going to have a hard conversation with this person and tell them no, but this is why, and this is what I'm saying yes to, and this is what this no is in service of. Then when you go to have the hard conversation, you're not going to spend the rest of the day at the bottom of a bottle of wine because you feel so guilty.
Or at the bottom of a bar of chocolate.
Either or whatever your jam is, or the bottom of Amazon, filling your cart up with things.
There's that too.
Yeah.
Maybe that was my sober journey with Amazon. Oh, I should have bought shares. So you talk a lot about stuck. How much does being stuck relate to identity?
Oh, that's such a good question. Ooh. I think it can be all of that's the full ball game. Because really, identity is at the heart of every dilemma. Who am I? What can I say yes to? Do I have the right to say no to this person? Do I have the right to ask for this thing? And again, as women, we have stories that have existed forever around money, around worth and value, and what rooms we're allowed to speak up in and what rooms we should keep quiet and play small in. And so if you're not grounded in your identity before you even get into the nuts and bolts of business, that's going to be a very turbulent ride.
But I feel like sometimes you don't even know. Right?
Well,
so actually the recording that I did with Dr. Aaron, we talk about this and how the ultimate purpose of our lives, if you're on this woo train, is to really be the most authentic versions of ourselves. And we often step away from being that because we don't really know what we want, but we also don't give ourselves the capacity to figure that out.
I was going to say hot take here. And again, no shame, because I did this for years and years and years. But often when we say we don't know what we want, what that actually means is, okay, I know what I want, but I'm not allowed to want it. And it's going to require an epic burning down of everything I thought I wanted. And so I'm just going to pretend I don't know what I want because that's safer. And that's not people consciously going, I don't know what I want. And legitimately, if you ask people, they'll say, I don't know. And like you said, but is it that you don't know? Or is it that we haven't created conditions for you to inquire and then listen for the answer? Because I pretended for a long time, not consciously. I would have sworn to a jury, I don't know who I am or what I want. But when I started paying attention, it becomes very clearly what resonates, even if you don't have the language of recovery or wellness or woo-ness or whatever, if you're listening, you can feel in your body when something's wrong or something's not right or a relationship is activating you in a way that's not good. And then, well, why am I doing this is a great way to stay stuck.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of a client of mine and she sold her agency, of which she was getting really burnt out. And so she sold it and she kind of got what she wanted, but not really. And then she's been dabbling, but there's now a time pressure for her to figure it out because that earn-out money is going to dry up. And so she wanted to go into like interior design. And so we're kind of I'm coaching her through this. I sense that she's either not aligned with this work or there's something in her that's like stopping her from actually diving in, but she wants to do it.
Mm.
And I know this feeling of like, I'm really good at something and I want to do that, but also I'm afraid to do it because then I think maybe this isn't what I should be doing. So then we doubt ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a crazy moment.
It's so hard. And that's where I love the parts work way of working. Internal family systems is the model I'm trained in, which looks at your mind not as this singular thing. Like, I want this. It's like, I am this. Your mind, like any complex system, is made of lots of parts. Part of me wants to be an interior designer, but part of me is not really aligned with it. Part of me is sure about this relationship. Part of me is not. Great. This model of looking at the mind as all of these parts makes room for all of that. And then you have what I call little inner boardroom meetings where you sit down and you invite all the parts of yourself and you have a dialogue with them, just like you treat your mind the same way you would your team, your company, your employees. It's like, I might not listen to everyone and implement everything, but I'm going to hear it and I'm going to be curious about it because there's valuable information in just listening. And we're experts, humans, at ignoring our inner voices. But if you think of it as like, this is your company and you can't fire anyone because they're all parts of you. So we're going to have a meeting and figure this out together. That's a really compassionate, beautiful way of working.
So how do people start that process of figuring it out? Like, think about this woman. We'll call her Jane, right? So Jane can decide to go all in or not.
If she were my client, I would be like, well, first of all, let's figure out how true is it that she has to go all in or not? Mm-hmm. Is it possible that she doesn't have to go all in? Is that a story that she's telling herself? It might be true. You know, like if Jane has 6 kids and 5 dogs and aging parents and needs to make money right now, then yeah, that's true. But my hunch is that this, I must go all in and make this decision, is putting her in that stuckness because that's too big of a jump for her brain. So then it's, how do we lower the risk threshold so it's safe to dabble and to take a little step in and then another little step? Because I say micro yeses allow for micro messes, because if you make a wrong move, you're not going to destroy everything. It's like, oops, that wasn't right. Course correct. Let's adjust. So I would say to Jane, how do we solve for make it smaller versus all in or all out? Because that freezes me up just listening to it.
I like that. And I live with a man who's like all or nothing. And his line is his joking line, but I get it, is he says, you can't be half pregnant. So you either have to decide or not.
That's true about having a baby. That's true with that particular thing. It is true,
but he applies that to everything in life.
Oh, buddy.
And like, so, but he's the kind of guy that does go all in. He has such discipline. He's so disciplined. I don't. And like the perfect example of like allowing myself to eat the chocolate while no one else in the program was allowed to is like, it's the only micro mess I can think of is that it would screw up my blood sugar levels, which relates to like muscle gain and all this stuff. But it's such a tiny morsel of chocolate.
Yeah.
And this is like anything in life. So right now we're in the business, we're in the season of hiring our most senior role, which is really scary. And I can make the decision to get this person in, which the point of them being in the business is to help it grow. So if they're not doing their job, we're not growing. But also I could stay where we are now, which is also just fine. So the micro yes, I got to figure out what the micro yes is in all of this.
And then, I mean, my husband's the same way. He's ex-military. And so he's very mission driven, and you commit to the mission and you go in, which is great if you can do that. Like if you can, like go for it, but not everybody can. So if you can't do that for whatever reason, and there's 100 reasons, then this micro yes approach is a really good way to bridge that gap. So you don't feel inert and just stuck and spinning around and around and around. And then redefining all in. If we're talking all in means I'm going to commit completely to what's true for me and about me, and I'm all in on not abandoning myself in this process, then you can hit that metric much more easily than I have to go all in and hire this person and bring them in at the salary tomorrow, right? It's like all in might be a micro yes for you today. All in tomorrow might look different.
A micro yes being all in. Yeah, I think in the way that we run business today. It's kind of like it's all in or it's not. It's like you make that investment or you don't.
Yeah. Which for some projects in some cases is true. But if you are really doubting the decision, then we make it smaller? Like being pregnant, you can't make that one smaller. You either are, some decisions are binary. They either are or they're not. Yeah. But that's very few things that are that absolute. And so then it's how can I make this choice smaller or minimize the risk associated with this choice, or go in knowing that if it's wrong and if it's a mistake, can I pivot out? Will this choice be the be all end all, the make or break kind of thing? Yeah. And again, sometimes the answer is yes. More often the answer is, well, not really, because there's some wiggle room here. I may not like the outcome of having to now fire someone and then figure all of that out, but is it safe to do that is a good question to ask.
I think we all try to do the thing that's easier, more comfortable, and safer.
But is it? That's the thing. It's like, is it? Yeah.
That's the question. Is it? Because in hiring this person, it is very uncomfortable, but the right candidate makes everything easier.
It's also really uncomfortable to be understaffed in a growing, scaling company where you're doing everything. It's hard to look at your budget, but it's hard not to have any clue where your money's going. It's hard to ask for investors, but it's hard to be financially strapped. This is a choose your hard situation. There is no easy way. It's which is the best bad? They're all bad. Which is the best bad?
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like in business, you either get those weeks or months or seasons where everything seems really hard. And then it gets easy. Like I remember last summer, we were in this big transition of reincorporating, opening up different bank accounts through different banks, a different accounting system all at once. And I was like, you know what? It makes sense to just do this all at once, like a Band-Aid. It was a 1.5 month long transition. Oh man, I made micro messes in these moments. One micro mess would be like our terms on our retainer are net zero. So the invoice is due upon receipt. But I was giving them like 30 or 60 days. And then we had a cash flow problem. And I was like, oops. So I'd go back to the clients and saying, hey, listen, I'm really sorry. I made a mistake on the invoice, but can you pay this today, please? Right. But this happens. And it was a tiny little mess. But we did it all at once. I don't know if I would have done that, but it kind of had to have been done. And it was the summertime, so worst time to do it too. But guess what happened now? Is like, everything just operates automatically in the back end and I don't do anything.
You chose your hard and it was a good hard. Yeah.
It was a great hard.
That's a really good hard. And I think for entrepreneurs specifically, some of the well-meaning mental healthy advice doesn't apply because there are times where it is going to be a 20-hour grind and you're not going to take a walk and power down your screen. And there are times where legitimately in service of your mission and your goal, you're going to have to grind. But also we want to get into the reminding yourself of your choices and that's supposed to be cyclical and almost like a season. Like it needs to come to an end. That's not a sustainable way of going. But when you're in that zone, micro yeses are one framework. And then can you outsource just whatever you can outsource? If this is the time not to feel guilty for door dashing. This is the time where you don't have to clean your baseboards. Like this is the, what can I not say no to, but what can I just not have that's so important right now? What can I relegate to the back burner or delegate or outsource while I am required to be superwoman right now?
Yeah. And I don't subscribe so much to the anti-hustle culture, but I also don't subscribe to the hustle culture. So I feel like I get the idea of the anti-hustle culture because it did go so far one way. And I think about the bro culture of the Valley startup scene. I lived in San Francisco for a little bit and it was so intense. I swear there were days I was walking through the city and I felt like the only woman there. And it was a lot. These are young kids in their 20s and they were working 12, 15, 16-hour days, 6-7 days a week. And that was cool, right? That was a badge of honor. And then and a lot of women did the work to notice that is just not sustainable because once these men get older or they get married and have kids, that just won't work. The anti-hustle was like, no, you don't have to work 40 hours a week. And no, your business shouldn't be hard. And you can create $1 million funnels without having to work 40 hours a week, which is a bunch of BS. Because
Thank you for naming that. Yes. Like, no.
There are seasons in our business that are going to be a grind. And when you can accept the fact that it's going to be tough, everything else becomes easier. Mind you, the seasons where things are a little bit lighter, enjoy them. It's kind of like the harvest, right?
Yes.
It's the harvest, and it's like planting the seed in the harvest.
It's true. I live in the Midwest. I've lived in California too, where there's no seasons and it's 72 and sunny every day, all day, which is great. But I don't panic in the winter. I don't enjoy cold, dark, snowy, whatever. But I do know spring's coming, and the cyclical nature, especially for a lot of women, is something that we're so disconnected from because we're told function at this optimal peak performance level and there is no cycling. It's this and all this and nothing but this. And that's just not, again, it's not sustainable. And even if you could sustain it, when you get where you want to go, you're not going to be a happy camper.
Oh, hello.
You're back.
Okay. Yes. And you were saying, and even if about the seasons.
God love this post-eclipse.
Oh man, Riverside.
Even if you could sustain this peak performance optimized living thing, when you get to where you want to go, whatever that metric is, I promise you, you're not going to be able to enjoy it. If you can't enjoy the process and create a rhythmic cycle and roots, the outcome isn't going to get you there.
Yeah. And you think about, I know there's coaches out there, even for coaching women who are running businesses based on their cycles,
which
like the moon. And, right.
That's
when
cool.
you and I talked about that, we're like, oh, she's having a messy day today. But there's also, the society's more accepting now, and we're shedding light on the fact that women are structured differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I see all these memes now in social, which I think are beautiful based on our, like the season of our cycle, how creative we are and how much time we need with others versus solo time to retreat. But business is like that too. And I think when we know it's that season of hustle, we accept that and we just go heads down, get it done. It's going to be fun, but hard and maybe long or not. We don't know. Like when I was signing up for the new accounting software and new banks and reincorporating, I didn't know how long it was going to take. And let me tell you, the stress actually came from thinking that this is how it's always going to be. Isn't that silly?
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because again, our brains are really trained out of being in touch with our cyclic nature. So of course you're going to go into panic of, oh my God, is this my new reality?
Yes.
Is this what it is now? Because if you're not connected to rhythm and cycles, I love that this conversation sort of veered into this arena. Yeah. Then it is going to feel like, welcome to reality. And then you're going to panic. And then that's when we get into all of the stuck places versus, okay, this is what this is right now. Also true. It's not forever. Also true. I chose this because this hard is better than the alternative hard. Also true. Oh my God, this is hard. Also true. I can do this and I will get a resting point at the end of this. But
I thought you were going to say I will get arrested.
Yes. Yes, you do get to rest.
Yeah.
Biological need.
Yeah. So there's also something in the stuckness or the stickiness that allows us to appreciate the good times a little bit more too.
You do need both. I don't enjoy the yuck. I don't enjoy the stuck, but we live in a world of day and night, up and down, sun and moon, fire and ice. How are you supposed to have any sort of comparison if you don't have both? And I don't enjoy this side of the both. And I'm not saying you have to love trauma or love tragedy, but being able to hold two truths at once. This is hard and there's an opposite and I get to have both.
That's right. And I love this. I learned this the other day, which I should have known this forever ago. But when you're faced with a decision between choosing one of two things, we always think that one thing is right and the other thing is wrong when both could be right.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mindful of time here. This is great. And I don't want us to get stuck. So I'm going to ask you one last question. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
Oh, I love that question so much. Being a wild woman means committing to what is true for you and about you, no matter what the cost.
I love that. All right, Britt, if people want to go online to find you and follow you, where can they go?
Find me on Instagram at Britt Frank. Britt has 2 T's, or my website, scienceofstuck.com. You can buy the book wherever you buy books.
Love it. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.